MedAiiD. Welcome to our Hangout. My name is David.
My name is Hansela.
I'm Cameron.
And my name's Evan.
So today we're going to be talking about the ethicality of healthcare data. So as we're moving more towards a tech-enabled health society, we have access to so much patient data. And this is harvested directly from sources through wearable technology. So with these new sources of data, the ethicality of keeping this data private has been widely discussed. For me, patient data should be available, if unlabeled. Companies should be able to get all the information of a patient, their demographics, symptoms, doctor visits, to discover new illnesses and treatments to stop these illnesses. While privacy may be a concern, health is something that should drive people to be more willing to expose themselves. What is everyone else's opinion on this?
So I think it's a double-sided coin, and you touched on that idea, is that we kind of need to keep people's data anonymous. But unfortunately, we've seen cases where there's articles coming out that discuss that there's a way or an algorithm that is 99% accurate in finding out who a person is based off of the medical data they have available on them, based off of the ones that are HIPAA compliant even, which means that you have to have like your name is stripped from the data, but even then cases exist where you can identify the person without even having their name. What about you guys? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, definitely double-edged coin. I mean, there's pros and cons. Obviously, HIPAA does exist. You got to follow that. But, I mean, if it's in the interest of the greater good, then that's definitely something you want to take into account.
I mean, yeah, I would tend to agree. I don't really think keeping patient data private is super necessary because you need that data to push forward medicine and allow for numerous innovations to be made, especially in respect to AI.
Yeah.
But I think what is important is trying to find a way to keep that patient's identity private.
Yeah, the real concern is the identity at the end of the day, the PII that's associated with the health record. I think the cases that do exist are bad actors, or like from if you could obtain our president's health records, right, you would be able to put out pieces saying that, hey, these are the things that he's going through, and like these are the actual concerns that people have, is leaders of our society or leaders of various organizations could take personal hits based off of that data being leaked, and that's kind of what we want to prevent it. But even with HIPAA in line today, that we have proof that it's not kind of competent enough yet to do that. So obviously there needs to be some change made. But yeah.
Right. I think there's definitely a big difference between personally identifiable information than rather it being anonymous. I mean, there's a huge line there. So, I mean, if you can benefit from anonymous data, then I think probably a good idea.
Right.
And
overall.
to add to that, I think a big part of making this kind of acceptable for everyone comes down to the companies behind this data being as transparent as possible.
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. The transparency is a huge thing. I think there was a case with Equifax when all of their data was leaked. They had social security numbers and whatnot. The real uproar was because they didn't disclose until a month after it was happening. A whole month they didn't disclose still. So I think so long as companies can stay completely transparent with how they're using the data, where it's being used, and how they're protecting the data, and when the event occurs that there is a data leak, then I think that will help mitigate the issues that are underlying with public trust in these kinds of solutions.
Yeah.
So the next topic I think was pretty led on from the last one. It was more or less answered, but just to rehash, do we believe that the benefits of privacy outweigh the benefits of health advancement?
Right, and what's it called? And we kind of touched on it in the last question as well. The idea is, again, it's a double-edged sword where you have the need to keep people's PII safe, which is personally identifying information, and HIPAA today does not do that. HIPAA is the role of HIPAA today is to protect some facets of that information, and they do it to a degree which isn't safe enough. So maybe the what's it called, compromise is somewhere with new legislation that both regulators come up with and working with technologists to help create that won't inhibit their models, right? Because for machine learning and these AI solutions to work, we need to have a comprehensive understanding of their demographics. We need to have an understanding of like what their age is, what socioeconomic class they belong to, because these all play pivotal roles in discerning what kind of is causing their underlying conditions. Right. So I think if it's a conversation that ought to be had. Unfortunately, it hasn't been had in a very long time.
Yeah, I like that point you made. I mean, there's definitely huge opportunities for advancements in medical technology and helping people overall, but you still gotta consider like this is someone's personal information, and I mean it can be used against them in ways.
Right.
But
Yeah, I think it's a very sharp answer. I would say yes, the benefits of health advancements are going above those of privacy, because we should be moving to advance our health solutions. We should be willing to give up those rights to be able to advance these solutions.
I think an analogy that could be made that I wanted to discuss about this point specifically was in other industries, people are extremely content with losing their access to privacy in order to get the convenience that they're afforded from these kinds of solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically talking about like even when you're driving your car, every single piece of information is currently recorded in a modern car. Where you're going, where do you stop at, how long do you stop for? They'll know every single thing. They know when you brake, how much you brake. All of that data is collected, and it's done so that we can create self-driving cars that will make our lives 10 times more efficient. And again, everyone knows this example and it's very drawn out, but I'll touch on it anyways. Social media is the same way, where we are sharing this information, but in return we get access to first a kind of like a method to access our friends and peers and whatnot as soon as we need them, and relevant advertisements, right? That's the argument that the social media companies are making, is in the past the advertisements were like not really for you, but now they're able to tailor these to something that you'd like. But we've seen that there's been cases where there's this hyper specialization where you kind of get trapped into these bubbles and you get pushed towards like ideologies that are maybe not ones that you would have initially agreed with. And that's kind of how we need to take it, is that obviously more regulation is needed, but we need to find out kind of what is that where is that tipping point where it's safe and advansive. So I think that's where we should look forward to.
Or go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say I think anyone would take saving lives over having more privacy, especially if it's your own or someone close to you. So
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with trust. I mean, obviously, like you said, people will take anyone who is against saving lives. I mean, especially if it's a small sacrifice to make, but people may be a little skeptical to have all that data and information out there that they don't know what these companies are doing or using it for.
yeah, so it goes back to that point of transparency.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, transparency is what's gonna enable these solutions to flourish or be hounded upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
If a company is outed for doing some sort of malpractice, which we've seen in cases in the past, I touched on the Equifax example. I can't think of any ones that are directly related to the health industry right now. But so long as that they're open about what's going on and they take action to prevent any mistakes that happen now, because obviously there's solutions that are being built by humans, and there's certain circumstances that not even the brightest of humans can foresee in some cases, that it's a net positive. And I think that's a pretty agreeable point. I think everyone can understand that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And nowadays people are becoming more aware of their privacy rights. We're going on websites, they're asking us if we want to allow our cookies. We're getting targeted by ads for our personal information, which I'm sure people are a little bit skeptical of, but at the same time, it's more convenient to be targeted by ads that cater to you. With people being more aware of their rights, do we think that people are going to be more willing to give them up or less willing?
That's a great question. And a company that I'm familiar with that started right here in our backyard at Carnegie Mellon University, that's aim is to help make transcription tools for patient-doctor interactions. It's called Abridge, the startup company. I think they just received their Series A funding in California, so they're doing a great job. It was started by a technologist, someone who had a background in software engineering, and a doctor, a cardiologist. And he was upset that there was no way to transcribe specifically medical jargony items, right? Like it's all this is towards more general like transcriptions, like think of Google Voice, think of Amazon Alexa, like they're more catered towards like general text. So they'll struggle extremely with medical jargon, shorthand, and whatnot, right? So the idea of a bridge is to actually have the patients go through and label and transcribe their interaction with their doctors, because they're kind of stuck on their hands. They want to see how they can help the next person. The idea is that can I be of help to the next person? So this company was able to find a solution that relies completely on the willingness of the patient or the user to what's it called, give up their private conversations that they had with their doctor to create a tool that helps other people in the future in making a solution that transcribes text, which from specifically the interaction that the doctor and the patient have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, I think, of course, people want to know their rights, but I think it really depends on the rights they have. So obviously, it kind of comes down to the future and what really the future holds. But obviously, if it protects them and it helps society as a whole within medicine and in general, I think people are just going to be more willing to give up that privacy.
Right.
I think we could even tie this back again to transparency. Just like people know their rights, people know what's going on with their data. I think it'll go a long way in making them less hesitant to give it up in the first place.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap it up, just a concluding thought. Where do you guys see the future of data privacy heading in terms of medicine and overall?
I think a point that we've touched on throughout, that we've seen as interwoven throughout every question that we kind of went through, is the idea of transparency. So in my opinion, what we should see more of, and you know, hopefully if any legislator or anyone comes across something like this, they are inspired to make regulations and legislation to make requirements of transparency of these events, how it's done, things that don't inhibit the actual technology, right? So that you're not losing out on like your data protections as a company, but protect the consumer side of everything in terms of making sure the consumer is aware. After all, the most aware consumer is going to make the best choice for themselves. So yeah.
So, I mean, personally, I do see a little bit of 1984 playing out, if you guys know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
I think that'll be sprinkled in here and there, and I think it eventually will get to a point where it's not really a choice. Everyone will kind of just have to agree to those new privacy laws, but I think there will be, protests and lawsuits against such surveillance and data gathering. I mean, I think it's inevitable. But at the end of the day, we've seen Google had to pull back on some of their data inputs because of criticism from the public. So it might be delayed, but like I said, at the end of the day, the world will continue to push towards a society that relies on AI and automation,
Right.
regardless, to make things easier. If it's making your life easier, I think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, you're not gonna convince the general public overnight that your data's shared now. Like you said, I'm sure there'll be plenty of lawsuits, but it'll take time. But I do think eventually it'll start to evolve into a place where, the data will be available to be used for benefiting others, really.
Sort of ties back to the intro, we're moving into a more tech-driven society, and not moving with society and not moving with tech and privacy, you're kind of behind. So we need to move forward and be willing to give up those rights to advance tech.
And to add to that, I think, as, new generations are born, right, they're kind of going to become more willing to take on those new privacy laws. So.
Yeah, I think it's a huge deal. I think the generation that we have legislating right now just doesn't even understand kind of what
Mm-hmm.
goes into it.
Yeah.
Their education is from a time maybe one or two generations before us. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for hosting the conversation, David.
Yeah.
Thank you, Evan and Cameron, for joining.
Thank you
No,
guys.
awesome stuff.
And thank you guys for coming and listening to our hangout.